I didn't know that our anniversary dinner would end with someone being carried out on a stretcher. I didn't know that a single glass of wine would quietly turn my marriage into a crime scene. But I knew, even before the night was over, that something had been planned, and that it wasn't meant to save me. It was our 10th anniversary, 10 years of marriage, 10 years of shared routines, shared decisions, shared silence. Ethan chose the restaurant. High up, expensive, the kind of place people choose when they want everything to look perfect. He said it was a celebration. I believed him because believing was easier than asking questions I might not like the answers to. We sat across from each other, smiling the way couples do when they know they're being watched. He raised his glass first. I followed. The wine was poured. The moment was set, everything looked right, but it didn't feel right. He was distracted. His attention kept drifting away from me, back to his phone, back to something I wasn't part of. His voice sounded practiced, like he had already rehearsed the evening in his head. For months before that night, things had been off. Late returns, short replies, a distance I couldn't explain but couldn't ignore either. I told myself it was stress. Work pressure. That's what people always say when they don't want to say the truth. I wanted the version of him I married, not the one sitting in front of me now. Halfway through the meal, I excused myself. I said I needed to step away for a moment. That was true, just not for the reason he thought. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to understand why my chest felt tight sitting across from my own husband. That was when someone said my name. Not loudly, carefully. It was the waitress. She looked nervous, like she wasn't sure she should be doing this. She told me she had seen Ethan put something into my wine while I was away from the table. She said it quickly, like she was afraid she'd lose her courage if she slowed down. She didn't know what it was, only that it didn't look accidental. For a moment, I thought she was wrong. I wanted her to be wrong. I had spent 10 years trusting the man she was talking about, but nothing in her face looked confused or dramatic. She looked scared. And then she walked away, leaving me alone with a thought I couldn't put back. I stood there, staring at my reflection, trying to decide if I was about to ruin my marriage over a misunderstanding, or save my life by listening to a stranger. When I went back to the table, Ethan asked if I was okay. His voice was calm, too calm. Our glasses were still there, exactly where we had left them, side by side. One of them was meant for me. I sat down and smiled. And I made a decision. If something had been done, I would know. And if nothing had been done, no one would ever find out what I almost suspected. I reached for the glass slowly, joked about the wine, and switched them. He didn't notice. That was the moment everything changed. For a few seconds after the switch, nothing happened. He kept talking. I kept listening, or pretending to. Every word he said felt distant, like background noise to a decision that was already in motion. My attention stayed on his hands, his face, the glass now resting in front of him. He lifted it again. I told myself not to stare. Staring would give me away. I nodded at something he said, smiled when he smiled, played my part the way I always had. The glass reached his lips. He drank without hesitation. A long sip, then another. I felt my pulse spike, sharp and sudden, like my body had already reached its conclusion even if my mind hadn't. I raised my own glass but didn't drink. I just held it there, watching. At first he seemed fine, too fine. He leaned back in his chair, relaxed, confident. The confidence of someone who believed the night was under control. That belief made my stomach turn. I wondered how long he had been planning this. Days, weeks, longer. I asked him about work, a safe topic. He answered briefly. His focus slipped again, not to his phone this time, but inward. His fingers tapped the table, then stopped. He blinked hard, like his eyes weren't adjusting properly. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said quickly, "just tired." But his voice wasn't steady. He reached for his water and missed the glass by a few inches, laughed it off, tried again. This time his hand shook. The laugh didn't come as easily. His jaw tightened. He swallowed like something was stuck in his throat. The first cough was small, easy to ignore. The second wasn't. People around us started to notice. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. His skin had gone pale, the color draining fast, like someone had turned down a light inside him. His eyes met mine for a brief second. There was confusion there, and something else. Fear. The glass tipped. Red wine spilled across the tablecloth. He tried to stand. He didn't make it. His body folded forward, heavy and sudden, like it had given up without warning. Someone shouted. A chair scraped loudly behind me. I stood up so fast my own chair fell backward. I said his name once, just once, out of habit more than concern. He didn't respond. Everything moved quickly after that. Voices, a phone call, hands reaching in. I stepped back as they laid him flat. I watched from a distance that felt unreal, like I was watching something I had already accepted. The waitress was there again. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her eyes met mine and then dropped to the floor. When the paramedics arrived, they worked fast. Oxygen, questions, numbers spoken out loud that meant nothing to me. Someone asked what he had consumed. I answered honestly. Dinner, wine, nothing unusual. Except it was. They lifted him onto the stretcher. His eyes were half open now, unfocused, searching the ceiling like it might explain what was happening to him. As they rolled him away, his hand twitched, reached out, not for me, just reflex. I followed the stretcher out of the restaurant. The night air felt sharp against my skin. Cameras hadn't arrived yet. That would come later. Right now, there was only the sound of sirens and the knowledge that whatever he had put in that glass had finally found its way to the wrong person. And I was still standing. The hospital waiting room was quiet in a way that made every sound feel louder. I sat alone, hands folded, staring at nothing in particular. My phone was in my bag. I didn't reach for it. I wasn't ready to explain why my husband had collapsed at our anniversary dinner. A doctor came out after what felt like hours but couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. She asked my name. Then she told me he was stable, sedated, being monitored. Her tone stayed neutral, careful. She said he had ingested a strong sedative, not something you take by mistake, not something that dissolves on its own. I didn't interrupt her, I just nodded. She asked if he had a prescription. I said no. She asked if there had been any accident with medication. I said no again. Then I told her about the waitress, about the glass, about the switch. I said it simply, like I was reporting something that had already happened and couldn't be changed. She looked at me for a moment longer than necessary. Then she said the dosage could have been fatal if treatment had been delayed. That was the moment the room shifted. Not emotionally, practically. Police were notified, statements would be needed. They told me I could see him briefly. I said I would wait. I wasn't ready to look at his face yet. While I waited, I started replaying the past year differently. The late nights, the short answers, the way he had slowly removed himself from anything that involved me. I thought about the second phone I had once found and convinced myself to ignore. I thought about how often I had adjusted my life to fit his moods without asking why. A nurse passed by and asked if I needed anything. I said no. When they finally let me see him, he looked smaller than I remembered. Machines did the work his body wasn't doing on its own. His eyes were closed. He didn't look dangerous now. He looked exposed. I didn't stay long. 2 officers spoke to me next. Calm, direct. They asked me to walk through the night step by step. I did. I didn't add emotion. I didn't remove facts. I told them exactly what happened in order. They said they would be investigating further. They said they might need access to our home. I gave permission without hesitation. When I left the hospital, it was already morning. I went home alone. The house felt different immediately. Not empty, compromised. I didn't wander. I went straight to the home office. I opened drawers I had never touched before, cabinets he had always kept locked. It didn't take long. Documents were hidden behind old files, letters from banks, warnings, notices I had never seen, and then something that made my hands stop moving. A power of attorney form, incomplete, unsigned, my name already printed, his signature line waiting. I sat down slowly. The plan wasn't sudden, it wasn't emotional, it was calculated. If I had been incapacitated, he would have had access to everything. My company, my accounts, my decisions. I closed the folder and put it back exactly where I found it. By the time the sun fully rose, I understood something clearly. What happened at the restaurant wasn't the beginning. It was the moment it failed. I didn't confront him, not that day, not the next. Confrontation would have given him time, and time was the one thing I wasn't willing to give anymore. He woke up 2 days later, still weak, still confused. He asked what happened. I told him he collapsed at dinner. I told him the doctor said it was a reaction to something he consumed. I didn't accuse. I didn't explain, I watched. His reaction told me more than words ever could. He didn't ask what he drank. He didn't ask how it happened. He didn't ask why I wasn't drinking much that night. He only asked one thing. Did you drink the wine? The question came too fast. I said no. I said I didn't feel like it. I watched his face carefully. The relief was instant, small, but real. He leaned back and closed his eyes like something heavy had just been lifted. That was enough. Over the next few days, I stayed calm, supportive, quiet. I played the role he expected. I answered calls. I handled messages. I didn't mention the police. I didn't mention the investigation. I let him believe he was still in control. Behind his back, everything moved. The police searched the house. They found more documents, financial records that didn't match. Emails sent from accounts I didn't know existed. Transfers that made no sense unless someone was desperate, very desperate. They told me his firm was collapsing faster than I realized. Lawsuits were coming. Assets were frozen. He was running out of options. That explained the timing. He had needed something to happen to me, not publicly, not violently, quietly, a hospital stay, an accident. Something that would leave me unable to act while he stepped in legally. At night, I lay next to him and listened to his breathing. I thought about how easily I could have been the one in that hospital bed. How close everything had come to ending without noise or witnesses. The waitress's face kept coming back to me. Her hesitation, her fear. She had no reason to lie, no reason to help me, and yet she did. I was called in to give another statement. This one longer, more detailed. I handed over everything I had found, the documents, the timelines, the form with my name already printed on it. The detective didn't look surprised. They told me charges were being prepared. Attempted poisoning, financial fraud, abuse of trust. The list was longer than I expected. When I got home that night, Ethan was waiting for me in the living room. He looked healthier, more alert, too alert. "Where were you?" he asked. "Out," I said. He studied my face, searching for something. Guilt, fear, confession. He didn't find it. "You've been different," he said carefully. I nodded. "So have you." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled, not the smile I remembered. This one was thin, measured. "You know," he said, "things almost went very wrong the other night." I met his eyes and held them. "Yes," I said, "they did." That was when I knew he understood. And that was when I knew he was scared. After that night, nothing was said directly. That was the most dangerous part. We moved around each other carefully, like two people who knew one wrong word could end everything. He became attentive in ways he hadn't been for months, asked if I needed anything, offered to help with small things he used to ignore. It wasn't guilt. It was calculation. He was trying to figure out what I knew. I let him try. The police didn't arrest him yet. They wanted more. They were tracing money, emails, timelines. They told me to stay normal. I was good at that. I had been practicing for years without knowing it. Then one evening, I noticed something missing. The storage bin in the office had been moved. Not emptied, just shifted, slightly, enough for me to know someone had been looking. I checked the folder with the documents. It was still there, but the order was wrong. He had opened it. He had read it. That night, he didn't sleep. He kept getting up, walking, checking his phone, stepping outside to take calls he thought I couldn't hear. He wasn't careful anymore. Pressure does that to people. The next morning, he asked me something that confirmed everything. "If something had happened to you," he said casually, "would you want me handling things for your company?" I didn't answer right away. "Why do you ask?" I said. He shrugged, just thinking ahead. I smiled. "I've already handled that." His face tightened. "Handled what?" "My affairs," I said. "Everything's updated." That was the moment his control cracked. Later that day, the detective called me. They had proof now, transaction trails, A purchase made under an alias. The substance matched what was in his system. It wasn't random. It wasn't an accident. They were ready. That evening, he came home early. Too early. He sat across from me and didn't pretend this time. "You told them," he said. I didn't ask who. "Yes," I said. He laughed once, short, sharp. "You don't even know what you've done." "I know exactly what I've done." He leaned forward. "I was fixing a problem." "You were creating one." He stood up abruptly, started pacing, talking faster now, saying things that didn't fully connect. Pressure had stripped him of polish. What was left was desperation. "They would have taken everything," he said, "everything I built. And you were willing to take me instead," I replied. That stopped him. The knock came less than an hour later. He didn't resist, not physically. He looked at me as they cuffed him, like he was still trying to understand how he had lost control so completely. As they led him away, he said one last thing. "You switched the glasses." I didn't answer. The door closed behind them, the house went quiet. And for the first time since that night at the restaurant, the suspense was no longer about what he might do next. It was about what would happen to him now. The news broke faster than I expected. Not the truth, just the surface. Headlines hinted at an investigation. Words like incident and irregularities appeared without explanation. His name was there, mine too, always together. People started calling. Some asked if he was okay, some asked if I was. No one asked the right questions yet. The police told me to stay quiet. I didn't argue. Silence had already kept me alive once. He was held overnight, released on bail. That part surprised me. I thought it would end faster. Instead, it stretched, which made it worse. When he came back to collect a few things, he didn't look angry. He looked focused, like he still believed there was a way out. He packed quickly. Clothes, laptop, files. He avoided the office. Avoided anything that could slow him down. Before he left, he stopped and looked at me. "You don't understand how close this was," he said. "I understand perfectly," I replied. He studied my face, trying to find doubt. He didn't find it. After he left, the detective returned, this time with confirmation. They had traced the purchase. A private seller, cash, a meeting caught on camera, his face clear, the substance match exactly. They told me he would be charged formally within days. That night I didn't sleep, not from fear, from anticipation. I kept replaying moments I had ignored, not because I missed them, but because I finally understood them. The next morning my lawyer called. My assets were protected, my company was untouched. His access had been blocked, whatever he had planned was over. Then another call came. The waitress. She had been questioned, she stuck to her story. Calm, precise, she hadn't wavered. Without her, nothing would have moved this fast. The charges were announced that afternoon: attempted poisoning, financial fraud, abuse of authority. The words were real now, public, permanent. He tried to deny it, said it was stress, said it was a misunderstanding, said the substance was meant to help him sleep. None of it matched the evidence. When I watched the press conference, I didn't feel relief. I felt distance, like I was watching the final act of something that had ended for me weeks ago. That evening, he called me. I didn't answer. He texted instead. "You ruined everything." I read it once, then deleted it. Later that night, I opened the folder again. The one with my name printed neatly at the top. I tore the papers in half, then again, until they were nothing. The suspense was no longer about whether he would hurt me. It was about how far he would fall. And whether he would take anyone else with him before he did. The court date was set quickly, faster than I expected. That told me how solid the case was. Strong cases don't wait. I didn't attend the first hearing. That was intentional. I wanted him to walk into that room without me. I wanted him to understand that I was no longer part of his shield. He pled not guilty. Of course he did. His lawyer pushed the same story everywhere. Stress, pressure, mental strain, a man on the edge who made poor decisions. They never said my name directly. They didn't need to. Everyone already knew who I was. What they didn't know was what else existed. The detective called me that night. They had recovered deleted messages from the second phone, not all of them, enough messages about money, about time running out, about needing control before she notices. One message stood out. If she's out of the way for a bit, everything resets. Not forever, just long enough. That night, I locked every door and slept with my phone beside me. Not because I was afraid of him, because people who lose everything don't always accept it quietly. 2 days later, his bail was revoked. They found more evidence. A second purchase attempt, another seller contacted after the restaurant incident. That mattered. It showed intent beyond one night, beyond one mistake. He was taken back into custody. This time, he didn't call. The next week passed in fragments. Meetings with lawyers, statements, documents. Everything was controlled, timed, deliberate, nothing emotional. Emotion complicates cases. I had learned that. Then something unexpected happened. His lawyer requested mediation. Not reconciliation, negotiation. They wanted a deal, reduced charges, limited exposure. In exchange for cooperation on the financial crimes, he was ready to talk about others, about schemes, about things much bigger than me. That told me how desperate he was. I refused to meet him. The prosecutor didn't. What he offered wasn't enough. The trial date was announced, final, public. The night before it began, I received an email from an unknown address. No greeting, no explanation. Just one line. You think you won, you don't know what winning costs. I forwarded it to the detective. They traced it, sent from inside the facility. He had borrowed someone's access. That was his last move. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse for the first time, not as his wife, not as support, as a witness. He was already there when I entered. He looked up, our eyes met for less than a second. There was no anger in his face now. Only disbelief. That was when I understood something clearly. He never thought I would survive long enough to speak. And now I was about to tell everything. I took the stand without looking at him. That was deliberate. Looking would have given him something. I wasn't there to give him anything. The questions came in order. Simple at first. Name, marriage length, occupations. Then the night of the anniversary, I spoke slowly. Clearly, no emotion added. No emotion removed. Facts hold better when they're left alone. I described the dinner. The glass, the warning, the switch, the collapse. I didn't say what I felt. I said what I saw. When the prosecutor asked why I switched the glasses, the room went quiet. I was told something was wrong, I said. I believed it. That was all. Then they introduced the evidence. The purchase records, the messages, the unfinished power of attorney, the timeline that showed planning, not panic. Each piece landed where it was meant to. He watched the screen when the messages appeared. He didn't look at me, not once. His lawyer tried to shake me, asked if I had misunderstood the waitress, asked if I had marital problems that might affect my memory, asked if I stood to gain financially from his arrest. I answered every question the same way, direct, short, finished. No. 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 Then they played the hospital recording. His voice, weak, confused, asking one question again and again. Did she drink the wine? The courtroom shifted. You could feel it. That wasn't the question of an innocent man. It was the question of someone checking whether a plan had worked. His lawyer objected, too late. When it was his turn to testify, he tried control first. Calm voice, careful words. He said he loved me. He said he would never hurt me. He said the substance was for his own anxiety, that he made a mistake. Then they showed the second purchase attempt. His voice cracked. They showed the message about resetting everything. He stopped talking. The judge didn't interrupt. Silence can be more damaging than pressure. By the end of the day, the outcome was already clear. You could see it in the way people avoided his eyes, in the way his own lawyer stopped arguing and started calculating. That night, the verdict came back. Guilty. On all major charges. He didn't react when it was read. No outburst, no denial, just a slow exhale, like someone finally realizing the game was over. As they led him away, he looked at me once. This time, I looked back. There was nothing left to say. The suspense wasn't gone. It had just changed shape. Now it was about what happens after someone is exposed. And whether the damage ever really stops spreading. The sentencing didn't happen immediately. There was a gap, a dangerous one. That's when people start talking. That's when stories shift. His lawyer filed motions, appeals, delays, anything to slow the fall. In the meantime, information kept leaking, not from me, from the wreckage he left behind. Former partners came forward. Employees, investors, people who had trusted him the same way I had. Every new statement added weight. Every document closed another door. Then the threats started. Not obvious ones, subtle, anonymous emails, missed calls with no voice messages, warnings disguised as advice. Be careful. Walk away while you can. You don't know who else is involved. I forwarded everything to the police. They told me not to change my routine. I did anyway. Control matters when pressure returns. One evening, I found my office door unlocked. Nothing was taken, nothing moved. That was the point. Someone wanted me to know they had been there. The detective confirmed it later. One of Ethan's former associates, not charged yet, nervous, looking for leverage. The case was bigger than him now. At the same time, Ethan made another move, this one quiet, legal. He tried to file a civil claim against me. Defamation, emotional distress, financial damage. The timing was deliberate, meant to intimidate, meant to drain. My lawyer shut it down within hours. The judge dismissed it before it reached a hearing. Too much evidence, too little credibility. That failure hit him harder than the verdict. He requested a meeting. I said no. He requested mediation again. I said no. Then he sent a letter, handwritten, delivered through his lawyer. It wasn't an apology, it wasn't a threat, it was something worse. He blamed me. He wrote that if I had trusted him, none of this would have happened. That if I hadn't switched the glasses, everything would have stayed manageable. That I forced his hand. I read it once. That was enough. The sentencing date was finalized the next morning. In the days leading up to it, the pressure peaked. Media parked outside. Questions shouted, stories rewritten. Some people painted me as brave, others as calculating. Both missed the point. I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to survive what came after. The night before sentencing, I slept for exactly 3 hours. Not from fear, from awareness. Endings feel heavy before they arrive. The next day, the courtroom filled early. This time, I didn't avoid looking at him. This time, I wanted him to see exactly who was still standing. The judge didn't take long. By the time sentencing began, there was nothing left to debate. The evidence had already buried him. This wasn't about whether he was guilty. It was about how much of his life would be taken in return. He stood when the judge spoke his name. He looked smaller than before, not weak, contained, like someone who finally understood the limits of what he could control. The sentence was heavy: prison time, financial penalties, permanent restrictions. Each number landed cleanly without drama. When it was over, there was no gasp in the room, just acceptance. He didn't look at me when it ended. That was when I expected relief. It didn't come. Instead, the pressure shifted. His conviction opened doors into other investigations. Names surfaced. Accounts were frozen. People he had worked with for years suddenly became cooperative. I was contacted again, asked to clarify details, asked to confirm timelines. I did, every time. Then something unexpected happened. One of his former partners disappeared. Not publicly, quietly, no contact, no trace. It triggered concern, not for him, for me. The detective warned me to stay alert, not afraid, alert. There was still money unaccounted for, still people who might want it to stay that way. That same week, I noticed my email had been accessed, a login attempt from a city I had never visited. The attempt failed, but it was intentional. Someone was testing boundaries. The next message came through an encrypted app I didn't recognize. You think this ends with him? No signature, no explanation. I didn't respond. The police traced the source partially. It led back to offshore accounts tied loosely to his firm. Not enough for charges, enough to confirm involvement. I realized then that what he had done wasn't isolated. I wasn't just collateral, I was the loose end. A journalist requested an interview. Exclusive. He promised to tell my side. I declined. Visibility is dangerous when people want silence. That night I moved, temporary, quiet, only a few people knew where I was. From there, I watched the case continue without me. Others stepped in. Whistleblowers, auditors, investigators. His sentence stood. But the fallout wasn't finished. Because when someone builds their life on control, they don't give it up easily. Even from behind bars. And I was about to learn how far his reach still extended. I thought prison would silence him. I was wrong. The first sign came through my lawyer, a routine update that wasn't routine at all. Ethan had started cooperating with investigators, not fully, selectively. He was trading information for leverage, not freedom. Influence. That mattered. Because the names he gave weren't small. Investors, brokers, shell companies, people who had never appeared on paper before, people who preferred problems to disappear quietly. A week later, one of my accounts was frozen without warning. Not seized, just paused. A technical review, they said, temporary. But it told me someone was pulling strings they shouldn't have access to. The detective confirmed it. Ethan had mentioned my name during cooperation, not as a victim, as a variable, someone who knew too much. That made me a problem. Then came the call. No caller ID, I answered by mistake. You should have taken the deal, a man said calmly, not threatening, cert. There was no deal, I replied. He paused, there was always a deal. The line went dead. I reported it immediately, they traced nothing, burner phone, clean. That night, my lawyer advised something I didn't expect. Stop reacting, she said, let them move first. Waiting was harder than acting. Every delay felt intentional now, every silence loaded. 2 days later, another message arrived, this one clearer. We can make things easier, for everyone. Attached was a document, a draft, a non-disclosure agreement, broad, aggressive. It offered money, a lot of it, in exchange for silence. No interviews, no cooperation beyond what I had already given, no future testimony if new cases opened. They wanted me quiet. I forwarded it to the prosecution. That changed everything. The next morning, arrests were made, not public yet, strategic, coordinated. Ethan's cooperation had exposed more than he intended. From his cell, he lost the last thing he believed he still had. Control. He tried to contact me again after that, through legal channels, a request to speak, one last time. I refused. That refusal did more damage than any accusation I could have made. Because without my silence, without my participation, his bargaining power collapsed. He had nothing left to offer that mattered. The threat stopped after that. Not because the danger was gone. Because the balance had shifted. And for the first time since the night of the anniversary, I wasn't waiting to see what he would do next. I was watching what everyone else would do now that the truth was loose. Once the arrest started, the silence changed. It wasn't empty anymore, it was controlled. Phones stopped ringing, emails stopped coming, the pressure didn't vanish, it redirected. The people who had wanted me quiet were now busy protecting themselves. That didn't make me safe, it made me unpredictable. The prosecutor asked me to stay available. New cases were opening, new timelines forming. My testimony might be needed again, not about Ethan, about what his collapse revealed. That was when I realized how much information I carried without meaning to. Conversations, meetings, introductions I had dismissed as background noise over the years, details that now mattered. I was careful with everything, where I went, who I spoke to, what I said out loud. I trusted fewer people than ever, and I trusted myself most. Then something shifted again. A sealed motion was filed. Emergency review. It involved evidence from Ethan's cooperation that contradicted his earlier statements. He had lied, not about me, about others, and in doing so, he had exposed himself again. The judge ordered a hearing. This one was closed. I wasn't invited, I didn't need to be. The outcome reached me anyway. His sentence was extended, privileges removed, communication restricted. The system he thought he could manipulate had finally adjusted to him. That night, I received one last message from an unknown number. No threat, no offer. Just 3 words. You were right. I didn't respond. After that, the suspense didn't come from outside anymore. It came from inside. From the quiet moments when I thought about how close everything had come to ending without explanation, without justice, without anyone knowing what really happened. The cases continued without me at the center. That mattered. I didn't want to be the story. I wanted the story to move on without needing me. When the final confirmation came that all charges connected to me were closed, I didn't celebrate. I archived documents, emails, numbers. Everything went into storage. Because I knew better than to believe this was about peace. It was about control changing hands. And I had finally taken mine back. I thought distance would end it. It didn't. It only changed the angle. A new investigator contacted me, federal this time, different tone, fewer words. He didn't ask about Ethan first. He asked about me, my routines, my decisions, my access. That was when I understood they were rebuilding the case outward, not inward. He told me something I hadn't known. Before the anniversary, Ethan had moved money into an account tied to my name, not transferred, positioned. It was meant to look like my decision once certain conditions were met. If I had been hospitalized, the paperwork would have activated, quietly, legally. That was the missing piece. They asked if I had authorized anything. I hadn't. They already knew that. What they needed was confirmation that I never would have. I gave it. Then they asked me something that made my pulse shift. Did he ever ask you to sign anything shortly before the incident? I remembered immediately. A folder, a casual mention, something about restructuring. I had said I'd look later. Later never came. That hesitation had saved me. The investigator told me the account had been frozen in time, not emptied, not used, just waiting, like everything else he planned. The next hearing was scheduled quietly. No press, no announcements. I was called in as a witness again, not public this time, strategic. Inside that room, they laid everything out. The financial trail, the intent, the sequence. It was cleaner than before. Sharper, no space for reinterpretation. Ethan didn't speak. Not once. When it was over, the investigator looked at me and said something I hadn't expected. He wasn't improvising, he was following a structure. That mattered. Structures mean repetition. Repetition means pattern. Pattern means others. 2 more arrests followed within days, names I recognized, men who had been at our table before, at our home, smiling, watching. The story had never been just about us. After that, the calls stopped completely, not even unknown numbers, nothing, silence real this time. But silence after exposure isn't peace, it's fallout settling. I was offered protection. Temporary, I declined. Visibility had already been my shield. Disappearing now would raise questions I didn't want. Instead, I did something deliberate. I filed for divorce. No announcement, no explanation, just paperwork, final, unemotional. That act closed the last door he could reach through. When the confirmation came back, stamped and approved, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not relief. Certainty. The divorce filing triggered his response faster than anything else had. He appealed. Not the conviction, not the sentence, the divorce. He claimed lack of consent, mental instability, said I was acting under influence from the investigation. It was weak, but it was loud, and loud was all he had left. The judge dismissed it in minutes. That should have been the end. It wasn't. The same week, a sealed document surfaced in court, one that hadn't been presented earlier. It came from his own cooperation file, a contradiction he hadn't noticed, a timeline that didn't match his testimony. It showed that the substance had been acquired earlier than he claimed, much earlier, before the financial collapse, before the panic, before the anniversary. That erased his last defense. The prosecution reopened sentencing review, quietly, efficiently. He requested another meeting with his lawyer, then another with the court, then another delay. None were granted. When the revised sentence was issued, it was heavier. Longer, No conditional review, no early consideration. This time, he reacted. Not in the courtroom, later. A message reached me through legal channels. Short, controlled, still trying to frame the ending. You think this is justice? I didn't respond. That silence did more damage than any argument, because he finally understood something. I wasn't fighting him anymore. I had already moved past the part where his opinion mattered. After that, his name started disappearing. From articles, from investigations, from conversation, others became the focus. Bigger figures, broader networks. He faded. But suspense doesn't end when the threat disappears. It lingers in what almost happened. In the knowledge that one decision, one pause, one stranger's warning had changed everything. The final notice arrived without ceremony. Case closed. All related matters resolved. No further action required. I read it once and filed it away. Not as closure. As proof, I thought case closed would mean silence. Instead, it meant consequences. People who had vanished started reappearing. Former friends, business contacts, some wanted to apologize, some wanted reassurance, some wanted to know how much I remembered. I kept my answers short. Memory is power when others are unsure what you know. One evening, my lawyer called with a warning. A civil suit was being prepared, not against me directly, against my company, indirect pressure. Different hands, same intent. They were testing whether I was still protected. I moved first. Accounts were separated, boards reshuffled, access tightened, every move legal, every step documented. When the suit was finally filed, it collapsed under its own weight. No evidence, no standing, no patience from the judge. That failure sent a message. After that, the threat stopped for good. Not because people suddenly became decent, but because risk had shifted. I was no longer the easy target. I was the one with records, timelines, and a history of not backing down. Then I received something unexpected. A request from the prosecution. They wanted me present at the final procedural hearing, not to testify, to observe. I agreed. When I walked into the room, Ethan was already seated. He didn't look up at first. He didn't need to, he knew I was there. The judge read the final orders. No revisions, no future motions, everything locked. When it ended, Ethan turned slightly in his chair, just enough to see me. He didn't speak. Neither did I. That was the last time we were ever in the same room. After that, things moved quickly. Property sold, accounts closed, names removed. Anything tied to him was cut away completely. There was no dramatic ending, no final confrontation, no moment where everything suddenly felt lighter. There was just absence. And absence, I learned, can be powerful. Because what remained was mine. Not because I took it. Because I refused to lose it. After the final hearing, the world didn't slow down. It watched. People expected a statement, an interview, some sign that I was done. I gave them nothing. Silence makes people uncomfortable. That worked in my favor. Then something unexpected surfaced. A financial auditor contacted me directly, not connected to the case, not part of the investigation. He said he had been reviewing historical records linked to Ethan's firm long before the collapse. He had found a pattern no one had flagged yet. A shadow account. It wasn't active anymore. It hadn't moved money in months, but it had existed quietly for years. It was registered under a holding company that no longer officially existed. The name on the authorization list caught my attention. Mine. Not signed, not activated, just listed, waiting. That meant one thing. Ethan had been planning further ahead than anyone realized, even before desperation, even before fear. I handed everything over immediately. The next arrest happened without warning. Another associate. This time someone I had met more than once. Someone who had sat in my home and laughed easily. The circle tightened again. The auditor told me something else before we ended the call. You weren't an accident in his plan, he said. You were a requirement. That sentence stayed with me. Because it reframed everything. The marriage, the timing, the trust. None of it had been random. I hadn't been collateral damage. I had been positioned. That realization didn't scare me. It sharpened me. A few days later, a package arrived, no return address. Inside was a flash drive, no note, no explanation. I didn't plug it in. I gave it to the authorities. What they found on it confirmed the worst assumption. Backup records, conversations, contingency plans, not just for one situation but many. He had built options into his life the way other people build savings. That was his final exposure. After that, there were no more surprises. No more hidden accounts, no more messages, no more pressure. The suspense didn't end with noise. It ended with exhaustion. Because when everything that can surface finally does, there's nothing left to wait for. The flash drive closed the last door. After that, no one reached out again, not to threaten, not to negotiate, not even to explain. Silence returned, but this time it felt final. Then the waitress contacted me. She hadn't spoken to anyone since giving her statement. She had kept her head down, stayed quiet, finished her shifts. She said she didn't expect anything else to come from it. She was wrong. Her testimony had become a key point, not dramatic, not emotional, precise. That made it dangerous. People like clean facts less than noise. Clean facts leave no escape. She told me she was leaving the restaurant, not because of pressure, because she didn't want to stay anywhere that reminded her of that night. She asked me if I thought she had done the right thing. I said yes. A week later, someone tried to reach her, not aggressively, casually, asking questions she had already answered. She refused to engage and reported it immediately. That was enough. Protection was offered, brief, discreet, effective. At the same time, another development surfaced. One of the associates who had been arrested started talking. Fully this time, no conditions, no bargaining. He confirmed what the auditor had hinted at. Ethan had built layers, backup plans for backup plans, people assigned to step in if others failed, accounts prepared years in advance. My name appeared more than once. Not because of love. Because of access. That was the final confirmation. The associate admitted something else before the statement ended. The anniversary wasn't chosen randomly. It was chosen because witnesses would remember it clearly, because if something went wrong, the story would be easier to control. A celebration, a coincidence, a tragedy softened by sentiment. The plan failed because of one variable he didn't calculate. Someone watching. When the statement was entered into evidence, the remaining investigations closed quickly. Too much exposure, too many connections. After that, the case stopped expanding. Everything that could fall had fallen. I met the waitress one last time, briefly, public place. No discussion of the case, no revisiting the night, just acknowledgement. She didn't save my life with force. She saved it by speaking once. That was enough. After everything settled, something unexpected followed. Invitations. Not interviews, not sympathy, quiet requests, private rooms, closed doors. People who had watched the case closely wanted to understand one thing. How I noticed. Not how I proved it, not how the case was built, just how I knew something was wrong before anything collapsed. I answered carefully. I didn't talk about courage, I didn't talk about strength. I talked about patterns, timing, questions that came too fast, relief that arrived too quickly. That made people uncomfortable. A few weeks later, another message reached me. This one wasn't anonymous. It was from someone who had worked with Ethan years earlier. He didn't defend him, he didn't accuse him either. He simply said he had always wondered what would have happened if the plan had succeeded. That question stayed with me longer than it should have. Because the answer was simple. No one would have questioned it. That realization was sharper than anything else. The danger wasn't the plan itself, it was how easily it could have passed as normal. Soon after, I was asked to provide input for a closed advisory group. No press, no recordings, just discussions about financial manipulation inside relationships, quiet systems, legal blind spots. I agreed. Not because I wanted visibility. Because I understood how much of this survives unnoticed. During one session, someone asked if I ever felt like the ending was incomplete. I said no. Because the ending wasn't about punishment, It was about interruption. The chain broke. That mattered more than any sentence. Later that night, I received a final update from the prosecution. All connected matters resolved. No further reviews, no pending exposure. That was the cleanest ending I was going to get. And I accepted it. The last thing to close wasn't legal, it was personal. I received confirmation that his appeals window had ended. No extensions, no remaining motions, everything was locked in place. From that point forward, nothing he filed would reach me again. That should have been the end of his presence in my life. Then I found out he had tried one final move before the window closed. He had requested a psychological review, not for himself, for the case record. He wanted to introduce doubt, not enough to overturn anything, just enough to blur it, enough to suggest misinterpretation, enough to leave questions behind. The request was denied. But the intent mattered. He didn't want freedom anymore. He wanted uncertainty. That told me everything. The day the denial was issued, I changed something quietly. I transferred full ownership of my company into a new structure. Clean, isolated, untouchable. It had nothing to do with fear. It was about finality. I didn't want his shadow anywhere near my future decisions. A week later, I ran into someone I hadn't seen since before the trial. A mutual acquaintance. They hesitated before speaking, then said something I didn't expect. "I never thought he'd do something like that," they said. I answered honestly. Neither did I. That wasn't denial, that was truth. The danger had never been obvious. It had been familiar. That was the most unsettling part. How normal everything had looked right up until it stopped being normal at all. That night I went through the last remaining files connected to him, not to analyze them, to remove them. One by one, archived, sealed, stored. Nothing destroyed, everything documented. Control isn't about erasing the past. It's about deciding where it belongs. When the final confirmation came in writing that all proceedings were closed, I didn't read it twice. I didn't need to. I knew what it said before I opened it. There would be no more calls. No more updates. No more suspense about what might surface next. The story was finished. All that remained was what came after. Nothing dramatic happened after that. And that was the point. No final message, no late discovery, no twist pulled from the past. Everything that could surface already had. What remained was silence that didn't carry threat anymore. The house felt neutral again, not safe, not dangerous, just unclaimed. I changed nothing immediately. I wanted to be sure the quiet was real. Weeks passed. No calls, no emails, no legal notices. His name stopped appearing in updates, then stopped appearing anywhere at all. People moved on the way they always do when a story no longer feeds uncertainty. I didn't miss him. What I noticed instead was how often I checked nothing. No phone reflex, no listening for footsteps. No replaying conversations to find hidden meanings. The tension that had shaped every decision for months finally loosened its grip. One evening, I poured a glass of wine. Just one. I didn't hesitate, I didn't inspect it, I didn't wait. I drank it calmly, without watching anything else in the room. That was how I knew it was over. Later, I received confirmation that he had been transferred. Different facility, different restrictions, farther away, not as a warning, as a fact. It meant no contact would ever be possible again. I archived the last remaining file that night, labeled it clearly, dated it, closed it. I didn't destroy anything. Stories like this don't disappear. They settle, they become reference points, warnings without speeches. The suspense didn't end with relief. It ended with certainty. Certainty that the plan had failed. Certainty that the silence was earned. Certainty that I was no longer reacting to a life someone else tried to script. Whatever he thought would happen that anniversary night never came true. What came instead was this. An ending he never planned for. And a future he no longer had access to. You have reached the end of the text.